Hi, my name is Alex Carter, and today I want to share with you a story that changed my life in ways I never imagined. I am 29 years old and work as a historian specializing in Victorian England. I've always been fascinated by that era, the cobblestone streets, the carriages rolling by, the intricate social norms, and, most of all, the humanity that thrived despite the hardships of the time. In the year 2178, where I come from, life is efficient, but hollow. Technology does everything for us: cooking, cleaning, driving, even making decisions sometimes. People hardly connect with one another anymore, and emotions feel like relics of the past. I've spent most of my life buried in books and simulations, longing for a time when life was raw and real. I work for the Historical Preservation Bureau, and we had just completed testing a device called the chronolens. Its purpose was simple: to observe the past without interfering. A window into history, they called it. But something went terribly wrong the first time I used it. It was a quiet afternoon, and I was alone in the lab, eager to test the chronolens for the first time. I inputted the coordinates, London, 1865. As I activated the device, a surge of energy coursed through the room. Lights flickered, alarms blared, and before I could process what was happening, I felt a sharp tug, as if the air itself had grabbed hold of me. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in the sterile white walls of the lab. Instead, I was standing on a bustling street, surrounded by gas lamps, horse-drawn carriages, and the smell of coal smoke in the air. I was in Victorian England, not as an observer, but as a man physically displaced in time. I wandered the streets in a daze, overwhelmed by the sights and sounds. My futuristic clothes earned me more than a few suspicious glances, and I realized I needed to blend in. That's when I met her, Emma Hawthorne. Emma was 24 years old, with chestnut brown hair that framed her face in soft waves. She had kind hazel eyes that seemed to hold both a world of pain and an unshakable resolve. She worked as a maid in the home of the Wellingtons, a wealthy family living in a grand estate on the outskirts of London. I met Emma when she found me sitting on the steps of a church, looking completely lost. She approached me cautiously, her voice gentle but firm. "Are you all right, sir? You seem out of place." I fumbled for words, unsure of how to explain myself. Eventually, I told her I was a scholar who had lost everything and was trying to start over. She believed me, or at least pretended to, and offered to help me find shelter. Emma's world was nothing like the one I had come from. Her days were long, starting before sunrise and ending well after dark. She scrubbed floors, polished silver, and endured the sharp tongue of Mrs. Wellington, the matriarch of the household. Despite this, Emma carried herself with quiet dignity, her kindness never wavering. She managed to get me a position as an assistant to the estate's gardener, Mr. Pritchard, an elderly man who was more interested in drinking tea than tending to the flowers. It wasn't much, but it allowed me to stay close to Emma. As we spent more time together, I found myself opening up to her in ways I never had with anyone else. She listened with genuine interest, her eyes lighting up as I described the wonders of my world. though I was careful not to reveal too much. She told me about her dreams of one day leaving service to open a small bookshop, a dream she knew was unlikely, but held on to nonetheless. Our bond deepened with each passing day. We stole moments together in the garden, sharing stories and laughter. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the estate in a golden glow, I finally told her the truth. "I'm not who you think I am, Emma," I said, my voice trembling. "I come from a time far beyond yours, a future where everything you know has changed." To my surprise, she didn't recoil or call me mad. Instead, she placed a hand on mine and said, "I don't understand it, Alex, but I believe you, and I don't care where or when you're from. You've been more honest and kind to me than anyone I've ever known." But the happiness we found in each other was fleeting. The chrono lens had started to pull me back, a faint hum in the back of my mind growing louder with each passing day. I knew my time with Emma was running out. One night, as the household slept, Emma and I shared a final dance in the empty ballroom. There was no music, just the sound of our hearts beating in unison. I wanted to stay, to defy the rules of time and fate, but Emma, ever practical, wouldn't let me. "You have to go, Alex," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Your world needs you, and you don't belong here, but I'll always carry you in my heart." As the chrono lens activated, pulling me back to my own time, I reached for her hand one last time, feeling the warmth of her touch fade as the world around me dissolved into light. Back in 2178, I was hailed as a hero for successfully testing the chrono lens, but I felt hollow. The sterile, emotionless world I had once called home now felt like a prison. I dedicated myself to ensuring that Emma's life, her kindness, and her dreams would be remembered. Years later, while visiting a historical archive, I found a small, handwritten journal labeled E.H. Inside were Emma's words, written long after I had left. She had managed to save enough to open her bookshop, a small but thriving haven for those who loved stories as much as she did. She had lived a good life, but in the final entry she wrote, "I once loved a man out of time. Though he was here for only a moment, he changed my life forever. Love, I've learned, is not bound by time or place. It is eternal." After discovering Emma's journal, I felt both a sense of closure and an overwhelming wave of grief. It was as if she had left me a message across the centuries, reminding me that love could endure even when time itself worked against it. But it also sparked a question I couldn't ignore. Could I see her again? Could I find a way to return to the past, even for a fleeting moment, to tell her how much she meant to me? I became obsessed with the idea. I spent every waking moment studying the chrono lens, analyzing its data, and pushing its capabilities. I argued with my supervisors at the Historical Preservation Bureau, telling them it wasn't enough to simply observe the past. We needed to understand the human stories behind the history. But they dismissed my arguments as sentimental nonsense. "It's too dangerous, Alex," my supervisor, Dr. Nolan, warned me. "You got lucky once, but tampering with time can unravel everything. You've already had your moment. Let it go." But I couldn't let it go. Emma's face, her voice, her laughter, they haunted me every day. I didn't want to change history. I didn't want to interfere. I just wanted one last chance to see her, to hold her hand, to tell her that she was my everything. Late one night, when the lab was empty, I made my decision. I recalibrated the chrono lens, overriding the safety protocols. I knew I was risking everything, my career, my future, even my life. But none of it mattered compared to the possibility of seeing Emma again. As the chrono lens activated, the same surge of energy engulfed me. I braced myself, hoping against hope that it would work. When the light faded, I found myself standing in the garden of the Wellington estate. The air was cool and fragrant, filled with the scent of blooming flowers. I looked around frantically, my heart racing, and then I saw her. Emma was sitting on a stone bench, reading a book by the light of a lantern. She looked just as I remembered, graceful, radiant, and utterly captivating. "Emma?" I whispered, my voice trembling. She looked up, her eyes widening in shock. "Alex? Is it really you?" I ran to her, falling to my knees at her feet. "It's me," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I had to come back. I couldn't let you go without telling you. You're the love of my life. You always will be." Emma's eyes filled with tears as she reached out to touch my face. "I thought I'd never see you again," she said, her voice breaking. "But you're here. You're really here." We embraced, holding each other as if the world around us had ceased to exist. For a moment, nothing else mattered. Time itself seemed to pause, allowing us to savor the joy of being together again. But the reality of our situation soon crept in. I explained to Emma that my return was temporary, that the chrono lens would eventually pull me back to the future. She listened silently, her hand clutching mine as if she could anchor me to her world. "Then let's make the most of the time we have," she said softly. We spent the night walking through the gardens, talking and laughing as if no time had passed. I told her about the future, about how her journal had inspired me, and about the lengths I had gone to just to see her again. She told me about her bookshop, about the people who had come into her life, and about how she had carried my memory with her all those years. As dawn approached, I felt the familiar hum of the chrono lens in the back of my mind. My time was running out. "I don't want to leave you again," I said, my voice breaking. Emma cupped my face in her hands, her eyes filled with both love and sadness. "You gave me a gift, Alex," she said. "You showed me a love that defied time itself. No matter where you go, a part of you will always be with me, and a part of me will always be with you." As the light of the chrono lens enveloped me, I held her hand tightly, unwilling to let go. But the pull was too strong, and I was torn away, her face fading into the distance. Years passed, but Emma's memory never faded. Her voice, her laughter, her kindness, they remained etched in my mind as if she were still beside me. I couldn't stop thinking about her, and though I tried to move on, my heart always found its way back to that one extraordinary time we shared. I immersed myself in my work, becoming a leading historian in the field of temporal studies. I published papers, gave lectures, and pushed for advancements in the understanding of time travel. But all of it felt hollow without Emma. Every discovery reminded me of her, of the impossibility of crossing time to be together. One evening, I was reviewing some old files when I came across a forgotten folder in the ChronoLens database. It contained data from my first trip back to the Victorian era, the trip that had changed my life. But as I analyzed the information, I noticed something odd. There was an energy signature I hadn't seen before, something that didn't align with the usual patterns of temporal travel. Curious, I ran a deeper analysis. The results were shocking. The signature wasn't from the ChronoLens itself. It was from Emma's timeline. It was as if a fragment of the temporal energy had somehow intertwined with her. I couldn't believe it. Could it mean that Emma had left some sort of message for me? Or, even more astonishing, that she might have tried to reach out across time? Desperate for answers, I poured all my energy into decoding the anomaly. Days turned into weeks as I worked tirelessly, isolating the signal and piecing together its meaning. Finally, after countless sleepless nights, I cracked the code. It wasn't just a message, it was coordinates. My heart raced as I realized what this could mean. Had Emma found a way to leave a clue, a path for me to follow? The coordinates didn't lead to the Victorian era, but to a point in time decades later. I didn't hesitate. I recalibrated the ChronoLens and prepared for another journey. This time, I wasn't just visiting the past. I was following a trail left by the woman I loved. When I activated the ChronoLens, the familiar surge of energy enveloped me. Moments later, I found myself in a bustling street in early 20th century London. The world had changed. Cars replaced horse-drawn carriages, and the air buzzed with the energy of a new era. I followed the coordinates to a small bookshop tucked away on a quiet street. My breath caught in my throat as I saw the sign above the door, Emma's Stories. I stepped inside, my heart pounding. The shop was warm and inviting, filled with the scent of aged paper and the soft hum of conversation. And there, behind the counter, was an older woman with familiar, kind eyes. "Emma?" I whispered, hardly daring to believe it. She looked up, her expression one of shock and recognition. "Alex?" Tears welled up in her eyes as she came around the counter. "Is it really you? I thought I'd never see you again." I rushed to her, taking her hands in mine. "It's me," I said, my voice trembling. "I followed the signal. I found you." Emma smiled through her tears, her face lighting up with the same warmth I remembered. "I left the coordinates in my journal," she said. "I didn't know if you'd ever find them, but I had to try. I couldn't let our story end like that." We spent hours talking, catching up on everything that had happened since we'd been apart. Emma had built a life for herself, opening the bookshop and dedicating it to preserving the stories of the past. But she'd never forgotten me. "I always believed you'd come back," she said. Even when it seemed impossible, I held on to that hope. "I never stopped loving you," I replied, "and I never will." Our reunion felt like a miracle, a second chance that defied the very laws of time. But as the hours passed, I felt the pull of the chrono lens once again. My time in this era was limited, and we both knew it. "Don't let this be goodbye," Emma said, her voice breaking. "It's not," I promised. "I'll find a way to stay. I'll find a way to make this work." As the light of the chrono lens enveloped me once more, I held on to Emma's hand, vowing to return to her. Back in my own time, I began working on a new project, a device that could stabilize a temporal presence, allowing me to stay in Emma's era permanently. It was the most challenging task I'd ever undertaken, but I was driven by the knowledge that true love was worth any sacrifice. The years that followed were a blur of relentless work, hope, and unshakable determination. My love for Emma drove me to push the limits of science. I poured every ounce of knowledge, creativity, and courage into designing a way to be with her permanently. The project became my life's work, an endeavor I called the temporal anchor. Unlike the chrono lens, which allowed only temporary journeys, the temporal anchor was designed to lock my presence in Emma's timeline, severing my connection to my own. It was risky, irreversible, and entirely untested. But I didn't care. My heart belonged in her world, no matter the cost. When the anchor was finally complete, I stood in the lab, staring at the device that would change everything. The glowing core pulsed with energy, a hum of possibility filling the air. I thought about the life I was leaving behind, my career, my future, everything familiar. But then I thought of Emma, her smile, her laughter, the way she believed in us against all odds, and I knew there was no choice to make. She was my future. With trembling hands, I activated the anchor. The room filled with light, a sensation of being pulled and unraveled, as though time itself was folding me into its arms. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. I opened my eyes. The world around me was quieter, softer. The hum of the anchor was gone. The lab was no longer there. Instead, I stood on the cobblestone street outside Emma's stories. My heart raced as I pushed open the door. Emma was there, arranging books on a shelf, her back turned to me. She had aged since I last saw her, her hair now streaked with silver. But she was still Emma, my Emma. "Emma," I said, my voice trembling. She turned slowly, her eyes widening as they met mine. For a moment, she seemed frozen, as if afraid to believe what she was seeing. Then tears filled her eyes, and she rushed toward me. "You came back," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm here," I said, pulling her into my arms. "And I'm never leaving again." We held each other for what felt like forever, the world around us fading into nothing. I told her about the anchor, about how I'd made the leap to stay with her. And she cried, her tears a mix of joy and disbelief. "This feels like a dream," she said, touching my face as if to make sure I was real. "It's not a dream," I said. "It's us. It's real." The days that followed were the happiest of my life. We built a life together, filling our days with laughter, love, and the simple joys of being by each other's side. Emma showed me her world, and I shared everything I could about mine. We became partners not just in love, but in purpose, working together to preserve the stories of the past and honor the connection that had brought us together. As the years went by, I never regretted my decision. Every moment with Emma was a gift, a reminder of the extraordinary power of love. We often talked about the improbable series of events that had brought us together, how a historian from the future and a maid from the past had defied time itself to be with each other. It was a story too unbelievable to be anything but true. One evening, as we sat together in the bookshop, the sun setting in a blaze of color outside, Emma took my hand. "Alex," she said softly, "do you think time is always meant to divide us? Or do you think love was meant to bridge it?" I smiled, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. "I think love was meant to conquer everything," I said, "even time." She smiled, leaning her head against my shoulder. And as the light faded and the stars began to shine, I held her close, knowing that we had done the impossible. We had found each other across centuries, and we had built a life together that was greater than time itself. Our story wasn't just a testament to love. It was a testament to hope, courage, and the belief that some things are worth fighting for, no matter how impossible they may seem. And so, in a quiet bookshop tucked away on a cobblestone street, our love story continued, timeless, unbreakable, and eternal.